Off you go then.
Okay. Ciao e benvenuto amici. My name is Brian Lee, and we are here in Italy with a special segment of The Late Show. They say tutte le strade conducono a Roma. All roads lead to Rome. And today, we're bringing some of the best minds in business and economics together right here in Rome. We have with us today Signor Mario Draghi, President of the ECB, Signor Matteo Renzi, Prime Minister of Italy, Giuliano Poletti, Italian Minister of Labor and Social Policies, and Catherine L. Mann, Chief Economist of the OECD. Now, we are here today to discuss and address the issue of slow growth in Italy, but first we must examine the economy of the euro area as a whole. Mr. Draghi?
Thank you, Brian. To do this, let us look at the three main economic indicators, which are GDP growth, inflation, and unemployment rates. GDP in the euro area grew by 0.3% in the fourth quarter of 2014, a slight increase from the second and third quarters. Although this indicates that the economy has grown, this level of growth is not what we would like to see coming out of a recession. In terms of individual economies, though Greece finally came out of its recession in 2014, its GDP contracted by 0.4% in the fourth quarter, caused by anxiety due to the elections and a possible exit of Greece from the euro area. Italy and Cyprus were the only two member states technically in a recession.
Now, what about inflation in the euro area? There have been deflationary trends in the economy, especially with the recent plummet in oil prices. Ms. Mann, what implications do these figures have for the euro area?
The annual inflation rate in the euro area in March of this year was negative 0.1%, up from January and February, yet still indicating a trend of deflation. This can be attributed to a shock in energy prices, which have fallen by 8.9% as of January of this year, but increased recently. Thereby, core inflation rates are higher, but both are still considerably below the 2% target set by the ECB. Most of the countries in the euro area are currently experiencing deflation. A potential deflationary cycle could lead to delayed spending and causes real interest rates to be much higher, hurting borrowers.
Unemployment in the euro area has been persistently high, but improved to 11.3% as of February of 2015. Youth unemployment decreased slightly over the past year to 22.9% as of February, yet still signals the continued inability of young graduates to find sustainable work. Germany has the lowest youth unemployment rate in the euro area at 7.2% as of February of 2015, attributable to their strong vocational training system.
Now, I understand that as of March 2015, the euro has depreciated to 12-year lows against the US dollar. How does this affect the countries of the euro area?
Well, Brian, the euro has depreciated against the US dollar from $1.38 in March of 2014 to $1.05 in March of this year. As a result, the euro will be more competitive with other currencies, helping to increase exports to non-euro area countries. Although the cost of imports will go up, this should not currently be a problem, as inflation in the euro area is significantly below the target rate of 2%.
Thank you, Mr. Draghi. Now, let's move on to Italy's economy. Prime Minister Renzi, would you please start us off?
Of course. As shown on the graph, the Italian economy experienced its third recession since the year 2008, during the second and third quarters of 2014. The flat fourth quarter of 2014 marked the 14th consecutive period with no GDP growth at all. The increase in exports due to a weaker euro was offset by the weak domestic demand. As of 2014, the Italian government's debt to GDP ratio was 128.5%. This is a 1.5% increase from the previous year. Now, although austerity measures can decrease government deficits, when high levels of government taxes are combined with lower government spending, what we usually see is slower growth. This trend was seen not only in Italy, but in France, Greece, and Belgium.
It is projected, though, that GDP growth in Italy will reach 0.6% in 2015, and in the euro area, growth will reach 1.3%, largely attributable to the ECB's quantitative easing program, in addition to the depreciation of the euro and the decline in oil prices.
Unemployment in November of 2014 was 13.2%, its highest level since 1977. However, it fell in February to 12.7%. Additionally, in February 2015, a staggering 42.6% of Italy's youth working age population was jobless. This is the fourth highest rate in the euro area and stems from Italy's weak vocational training and education system.
As can be seen on slide 12, in March of 2015, inflation in Italy declined by 0.4% from a year ago. This is far from the healthy 2% the ECB has targeted and shows signs of deflation.
Thank you. Based on what you've all described, it seems that the problem of slow growth in Italy has turned into a full-blown recession. Mr. Draghi, would you please explain the underlying causes of slow growth in Italy?
Certainly, Brian. Slow growth in Italy arises from a series of problems that have all contributed to a lack of productivity and competitiveness. These issues are caused by an inefficient labor market and a lack of innovation.
I understand that the cost of operating a business in Italy is very high, as is reflected in the high total tax that a firm must pay. At an astounding 65.4%, it is the second highest in the euro area. This tax combines corporate taxes, labor taxes, and various administrative taxes. Furthermore, unit labor costs in Italy are 10% higher than the euro area average. This tax burden, combined with the high labor costs, makes it difficult for Italian businesses to price their products competitively and also discourages foreign direct investment. As a result, FDI in Italy is a mere 0.6% of GDP, whereas in Germany it is over double that amount at 1.4%. Mr. Paletti, would you please explain the problems that Italy's labor market currently faces?
Of course. In Italy, stringent regulations or worker protection laws make it difficult for companies to hire and fire employees. The costs associated with mandatory employer contributions and legal fees translate to higher total tax rates. Therefore, companies are less willing to use standard long-term contracts. As a result, 70% of new contracts in Italy are short-term contracts, which inhibit productivity and efficiency because workers can't receive benefits, must regularly switch between jobs, and companies are less willing to invest in workers' career development.
Interesting. Now, Prime Minister Renzi, what about the lack of spending on new technologies in Italy throughout the last decade?
Well, as of 2014, businesses in Italy spent a mere 1.27% of GDP on research and technological development. This figure is approximately half of the OECD average. Now, this poses a problem to businesses in Italy as they're unable to create or utilize new technology at the pace of other developed countries around the world.
In addition, Italy has the highest level of small and medium enterprises, or SMEs, in the entire euro area. They currently account for 99.9% of all firms in Italy. Most of these are micro-sized firms and are discouraged from growing due to excessive red tape, such as stringent labor laws. These SMEs also lack access to new financing, which prevents them from adequately spending on technologies to improve their efficiency.
There's no doubt that Italy needs both fiscal and structural changes to fix its lack of productivity and competitiveness. Ms. Mann, as chief economist of the OECD, do you have any policy recommendations that would help solve Italy's problems?
Certainly. Since all the countries in the euro area use the euro, they share a common monetary policy dictated by the ECB. As a result, fiscal and structural changes must be employed in Italy. Solutions should be targeted towards increasing the efficiency of the labor market, incentivizing entrepreneurship and RTD spending, and growing high-value industries.
In addressing structural changes to the Italian labor market, it is necessary for us to first highlight new policies already approved by Mr. Renzi's New Jobs Act. Mr. Renzi, would you please elaborate?
Of course. In Italy, the abundant short-term contracts provide workers with almost no benefits, which is why my Jobs Act targets this. It combines a series of temporary contracts into a single contract that phases in benefits over time, as well as promoting the signing of permanent contracts. Also, prior to the end of a 3-year period, workers can now be much more easily fired. This reduces the concerns that businesses have when hiring new workers, as well as cracking down on the dual nature of the current labor market.
Mr. Renzi, we can all agree that the changes you have made are necessary to reforming the Italian labor market, but further action can be employed. Currently, companies with under 15 employees are exempt from increasingly stringent regulations in terms of hiring, legal fees, and contributions to various forms of benefits. By increasing this exemption to companies with 50 employees and less, a significantly larger proportion of small businesses in Italy will be encouraged to expand due to lower risks in hiring new employees.
And how do your solutions target Italy's industrial redundancy fund?
The Cassa Integrazione Guadagni, or CIG fund, forces employers to contribute 4.41% of their employees' salaries, tacked as a redundancy fund in the case workers are laid off due to company restructuring or seasonal adjustments. By reducing the required contribution from 4.41% to 2%, labor costs for businesses will decrease.
Additionally, we support Mr. Renzi's plan to have Italy enforce unemployment benefits that are conditional on long-term unemployed workers receiving vocational training. These measures will better utilize the redundancy and unemployment funds and encourage workers to take on new skills. Furthermore, employee severance fees for justified firings should be lowered from 6.91% of cumulative salary to 5%, which will allow businesses more flexibility and reduce the cost of labor. With lower labor costs, businesses will be able to become more competitive by lowering the prices of their product, thereby becoming competitive domestically and internationally. Although there will be social backlash in the short term due to Italy's strong labor unions, the influx and expansion of businesses in Italy due to lower labor costs will eventually result in increased hiring and lower unemployment. Definite long-term benefits for Italian workers.
Entrepreneurship, business investment, and innovation are all crucial to fostering long-term growth and stability. However, the high startup costs in Italy, currently associated with a large amount of regulatory barriers, as well as the red tape, discourage entrepreneurs.
Indeed. Italy's average cost is 4,587 euros for starting a business. And as a result, in the past decade, the number of businesses registered annually has decreased by 14%. In the Netherlands, the cost of starting a business are only 2,259 euros. And as a result, the number of businesses registered in the past 4 years has increased by 6%. I propose that Italy streamline the process of creating a new business and lower the costs. For example, Italy's current notary fee is at the excessive level of 2,600 euros and should be capped at 1,000 euros, making it easier to start a business.
Small and medium-sized firms need to invest more in new technologies, but often lack access to financing. Ms. Mann, would you please explain what new forms of financing have become available to them?
Well, the Italian government recently permitted pension funds and insurance companies to lend money directly to SMEs. Lending to SMEs has also been encouraged through products called mini bonds. Also, it will be easier for SMEs to borrow money if the disclosures they have to make are less complicated. Thus, I propose that Italy push for the creation of a consistent system of cross-border credit scoring, as this will encourage investors to lend to SMEs. To encourage RTD spending, the government should provide tax credits of up to 10% on funds used for such spending. Combined, these factors will make Italy a more hospitable environment for innovation.
And in looking to the future, what industries should Italy target for expansion and growth?
According to the OECD, Italy has a real comparative advantage in the field of machinery. In fact, 20% of all Italian exports are in this field. Italy also has a comparative advantage in the fashion industry, where it has managed to maintain high levels of output even during times of recession, thus earning it the title of the world's top exporter in textiles, clothing, and leather goods.
These well-established fields can continue expanding, so it is important for the Italian government to continue growing and creating jobs in these high-value industries. I propose that the Italian government subsidize the building of new factories and investment in capital goods for companies in these industries.
Italy has a unique problem. Its industrial north outperforms its agrarian south, not just in wealth, but in education as well. By providing low-interest government loans to targeted locations, we will see that these differences will eventually subside as new industries are incentivized to move into the south. This will solve for the 40% difference in GDP per capita.
To further this integration, I propose increased vocational training targeted at these high-value industries in the South. This vocational education system would model the one in Germany, where students receive both school and work-based learning. Students will spend up to 4 days a week receiving training under a private law vocational training contract, and up to 2 days a week learning at local colleges.
I agree with Mr. Paletti. In order to maximize productivity, it is crucial for the Italian education system to support the skills and knowledge needed in the labor market. Stronger vocational training programs ensure that young people gain the skills needed to enter the labor force, helping to drastically reduce the youth unemployment rate in the South that peaked at 60% in 2014.
Finally, to foster development, the Italian government should encourage public-private partnerships between colleges and companies or government labs. Not only can this lead to the creation of new fields, workers and students from the private entity will have greater access to resources. Furthermore, this will allow for the commercialization of government-developed technologies, which often play a large role in creating, strengthening, and revitalizing certain industries.
Sorry to cut you off, Ms. Mann, but we're almost out of time. Prime Minister Renzi, I hope that the discussion here today involving increasing the efficiency of the labor market, incentivizing entrepreneurship and RTD spending, and growing high-value industries will help you in implementing policies to pull Italy out of its slow growth. Good night, everyone, and thanks for watching The Late Show with Brian.
Thank you for this presentation. Are you ready for questions?
Yes.
If so, I'll start with 2 general questions for you. The first one is the following. 9 countries in the EU, in the European Union, are not in the euro area. Are these countries likely to take the necessary steps to adopt the euro as their currency? Why or why not?
Prime Minister Renzi?
We believe that the countries that have not yet adopted the euro will not do so because they want to continue to maintain their autonomy by managing their own fiscal structures and by managing their own fiscal policies and not being tied up with the monetary policies that the ECB regulates.
But in the long term, if we see that these countries do achieve a stable level of growth, sustainable debt levels, and long-term stability, there is a real possibility that they will enter into the euro area and they will be adopting the euro. But that's not in the foreseeable future. It could happen later on.
Okay, thank you very much. The second general question is about the euro. And you mentioned that recently the euro declined vis-à-vis the dollar, and today it's at 112, and a year ago it was 138. What effects might this change have on the euro area's economy as a whole? And more specifically, on Italy's growth prospects, what effects might it have?
Mr. Draghi?
So with the value of the euro declining, what we will usually see is that other non-euro area countries will be able to purchase the euro at a rate that they like more, so that they will buy more exports from the euro area countries. So what we see already is that Italy has already had an increase in net exports, meaning that they have had more exports and less imports from other countries. And what this helps to do is this helps to grow an economy. So basically with the falling level of the euro, the level of exports to non-euro area countries has actually increased and has helped the economy of the euro area and Italy.
Okay, so you've mentioned a number of things that you think Italy can do to support its growth, to a large degree by creating opportunities for labor market flexibility and for innovation. Almost all of the things you mentioned require some reduction in taxes or incentives in terms of loans, subsidies. In the context of the points you mentioned about the high level of debt in Italy, about the need within the framework of European policy setting to get that down, I guess my first question is, how would you convince your partners in the monetary union that you should be able to do that without breaking the budget constraints? And secondly, if you are not actually succeeding in keeping to your budget constraints and doing this, what would you pull back in terms of, or what would you do differently if you were finding that you were actually running into problems on the fiscal side?
Prime Minister Renzi, would you please start us off?
So just to talk about our funding plan in general, first of all, we plan to engage in a form of government spending known as deficit spending. So essentially what the Italian government will be doing is that they'll be selling out bonds in order to raise revenue to help propose and forward our plans.
We consider this deficit spending to be fiscally responsible spending, as while it may result in an increase in the debt to GDP ratio in the short term, in the long term, our plans will increase the level of employment, which will therefore increase tax revenue, which will help bring down the debt to GDP ratio.
In addition, businesses and private corporations will be covering some of the costs of the implementation of vocational training programs because they will be receiving the workers who are highly trained in that field. And our structural reforms will also be less expensive than some of the loans and subsidies that we'll be making.
And this shouldn't be an issue to other European countries because Italy is currently below the 3% budget deficit allowed by the Stability and Growth Pact. And even with the projections for the cost of our plans, it would still stay significantly below that 3% level. So we do not view it as a problem, and we think that other countries would encourage Italy to embrace these structural changes that are necessary to fix its problems.
One of the things that you seem to focus on a great deal in your presentation is what will happen to people of working age, whether young or older. Italy's biggest problem is also its aging population, which has a huge dependency on pensions. How would you address that?
Mr. Paletti?
So Italy's aging population means that there are more vacancies being left in the workforce than there are people entering the workforce, and that places a lot of undue burden on the social benefits program, pensions, healthcare, Social Security. all those sorts of government transfer programs, and with more and more people relying on those fixed incomes and less people in the workforce to be taxed to provide for those incomes, we can see that aging population will affect our solutions just by taking away some of the government's revenue and forcing the Italian government to think of other ways to obtain funding.
Ms. Mann?
However, with the implementation of programs such as vocational training, we will see that more workers will be able to find jobs as the skills that are currently being demanded in the job market and the skills of the workers will match. So this will help increase the labor force participation rate and therefore reduce the burden of the aging population.
Mr. Draghi?
And in addition, with more people being hired and with business expanding, there will be increased tax revenue, which will actually help to counteract the burden in the long term on the Social Security, the pensions, and all those other forms of welfare.
In addition to what Ms. Mann was stating earlier about discourage workers re-entering the labor force, we can also implement policies to incentivize births among Italians, which should solve for the current aging population in Italy that does potentially pose a problem to its future pension healthcare systems.
Out of curiosity, what would those incentives be?
It could be tax breaks, small amounts of tax breaks to families who have more children, or it could even be something as simple as making park benches bend so that when people are sitting on them, they come closer together and are more incentivized to have children.
Yes, right.
Ms. Mann?
And also in Italy, the female participation in the workforce is considerably below the male participation in the workforce. And this is largely due to the fact that when women have families, they have to take care of the families. So by providing more childcare benefits, such as in other Euro area countries as Spain, where the women participation rate in the workforce is relatively high, then we will see that more people will be able to join the workforce.
Just to follow up on these issues, you told us that the youth unemployment rate was very high in the south of Italy, in the southern part. Through these kinds of measures that you've talked about, vocational training, etc., could you indicate approximately how long it might take for this gap to be reduced and the high unemployment rate to go down in the south in particular?
Mr. Draghi?
So basically, we have some short-term and we have some long-term solutions. Some of these solutions that we have are short-term in that they will happen immediately, such as our fiscal solutions, which will be implemented immediately. However, all of our solutions have some long-term benefits. So vocational training programs, they will be implemented in the South, and they will take, what they will do is that they will train the youths, and after they undergo this training, they will be able to enter the workforce as the unemployment, the structural unemployment is reduced as the mismatch of skills between the people in the South and the jobs that are in demand are reduced. So we will see that after the vocational training programs are implemented, there will be a long-term benefit in the vocational training with the reduction in structural unemployment.
Prime Minister Renzi?
So really what we see through vocational training is that it's providing a new supply of workers, but we also foster demand by incentivizing new industries to move into the South, and thus when supply and demand both meet at a higher point, the economy of Italy will grow.
So let me ask you this. Italy has performed very poorly for a long period of time. You've documented some of that in your presentation. If you're a leader in the Italian government or in the Italian political scene, how do you convince the public that it doesn't pay to consider leaving monetary union given Italy's poor performance on such a long time horizon? What is it that Italy really gains by being in monetary union, especially given the performance it's been generating over the course of the last 10, 15 years?
Prime Minister Renzi?
So really the beauty of a monetary system between the different Euro area countries are that it doesn't have any trade barriers. We see that for countries such as Italy, where trade makes up such a big portion of their economy. 30% of its GDP arises from trade. With these free trade barriers, Italy's economy will be growing. And if it exits the Euro area or if it takes away from the monetary policy, we'll see that trade becomes increasingly harder, and the economy of Italy will perhaps in the long term collapse as they're unable to continue to foster this positive trade benefits with these other Euro area countries.
Mr. Draghi?
So recently, the ECB has implemented this program called quantitative easing, in which the central banks of various countries, as well as the ECB, buys bonds in bulk, 1.16 trillion to be exact. So basically what this does is this helps to pull the Italian economy, it lowers the real interest rates by increasing the money supply. What this does is this actually helps to increase the level of business investment and incentivizes economic growth. And without the ECB and the structure of the ECB, while leaving the euro area, Italy will not have the sufficient infrastructure or structures at all to implement such a policy, which is such a good benefit. And additionally, the problem with Italy isn't that they're in the monetary union. It's that their labor markets are very rigid rather than very flexible, which has been plaguing the Italian economy since before the recession.
Thank you very much. Your time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.